Welcome to Comic Books and You. Today we are going to go over Hybrids, The Sons of Gods, Issue 1. This is my second time recording this video. I've been having all sorts of mic issues. I'm sorry if it sounds like I'm tired. An odd day overall. I got this book as a review copy from Luke Stone, the creator of the book. He wanted people to review the book on Twitter, and I said that I was, ready to do it. That's what I do on this channel. I'm not going to beg for review copies or anything like that, but if someone's offering it, I'm going to take it, and it did motivate me to try to find this book and buy it. The original campaign for this trade paperback, which includes the first 5 books of the Hybrids series, there's a second trade paperback, either upcoming or ready. This was backed by 102 backers, $3,000. It's not the most successful Kickstarter we've seen here, but overall, it was properly created and is available. So that's a book that you can likely get your hands on, and I would recommend it personally. The main character in issue 1 and our main character throughout this story is Trashman. His real name is Clarence, but he doesn't like to be called that, so we prefer to call him by his nickname, which is basically a superhero name. He's a fairly massive individual. I'd say he's about twice the size as almost all the other characters in this series, both in height and in width, and it's not just bulk, it's actual muscle. He's a fairly kind man. He doesn't seem to want really any form of trouble. Basically, your Jackie Chan archetype. Owns a little dog called Sergeant Pepper. Nice little wiener dog. But I think more importantly for us comic book fan, I would say that his superpower is more interesting here. He's basically bulletproof and generates blue energy around it, and he can use that energy as a weapon. Seems to be some form of kinetic reversal. So he takes damage, and he takes that energy from that damage and focuses it back on his enemies. Trashman is basically the only character of any significance in this particular issue. All the other characters are there to serve a role or move the plot forward, but we get no real introduction to them. They're just present, and they either get in Trashman's way or try to help him. As such, this is the only real character we're going to discuss in this portion, and now we're going to go over the story like we normally do. So, a strange airplane / VTOL is chasing our massive man and calling out his name, which he doesn't really like. And he starts getting attacked by that weird airplane, and he starts being surrounded by energy. Once that starts happening, we snap back to earlier in the day. So, Trashman and his colleague Brian, they're having some small talk in the trash truck as they're getting ready for a day of work. They're discussing an odd event with weird lights appearing in the sky all around the world or in different cities. And they're putting that down as conspiracy theories or various other strange occurrences. But as they're starting their day of work and they're picking up some trash cans, a weird drone shows up, scans Trashman, and gives them a warning that bad news are incoming. Suddenly, the VTOL shows up and scares everybody. Trashman gets hit by a car, which is totaled, and he doesn't seem to take any damage. And our gigantic man runs away. He manages to get home. He's a little bit perturbed by the situation. He grabs essentials, his keys, checks the mail, does the basic things you would do before you try to leave your apartment for a little bit, feeding his nice little dog. But the 2 crew members of the VTOL show up at his door with worse intention than trying to tell him about the good news. Our hero gets into a fight with the Beast Man looking dude. The Beast Man gets decked out with a very strong punch. They decide to switch over to stun bullets, decide to shoot at him, and doesn't do much once again. And he uses the energy from those bullets and the damage to basically bust the wall open and jump from the 3rd story. Well, I think that's the 3rd story. Might be the 4th story. We're not really clear here as to how high that apartment is. We go back to the evening, and the evil duo decides to go all out with their VTOL, shooting the mounted weapons, probably something like 50 cal or something along those lines, but it barely does any damage to Trashman. He retaliates with another massive energy beams, which takes down the airplane. Nasty Duo comes out alive, and they start attacking Trashman again, but he counters by doing some sort of ground pound, which stuns them and sends them flying. After this, the people who actually warned them that trouble was coming show up to try to start a talk with him after rescuing his dog, and this is where this particular book ends. Pretty good pacing overall, even though the book is a slight bit shorter than a normal floppy. It flows fairly well, and it gives us all the details that we really want and hooks us for the upcoming books and issues. So there's no major issue here with the story. As far as the covers go, we're going to go first over with the trade paperback cover that we looked at a little bit during the covers video that we had last week. Kind of reminiscent of early Image comics by Jim Lee, Rob Liefeld, maybe even Mike Silvestri. It's a very strong presentation with our 4 characters in a diamond shape with a balance of male and female energy. It does what it needs to do and attracts attention. There's a few things that start coming up once you look a little bit more into it. MSK brought up that Bone, the one of the characters that rescues Trashman, looks like the main character in this particular issue, as he's the one that's front, and he doesn't show his face or anything, so it's a little bit of an odd placement. But then again, it's hard to say anything because Trashman would take up the majority of the cover, whatever you want to do. And one thing that I'm not a huge fan of is the color palette with the purple color in the back for the teleportation field. I understand why this is used and how it is used, but it just is a bit glaring as far as the contrast we get with the other colors. And I don't like the city in the back that's going sideways. Kind of feels like they're falling more than that they're just teleporting in or out. So it has a bit of an issue. What I do like, though, is the strong branding at the top. The branding is really, really good on this and would attract attention as well if you place this on a spinner rack or something of the sort. The original cover for issue 1 was unfortunately much weaker. All we have is basically Trashman charging up energy. It had the strong branding at the top in the issue version, but this is an excerpt from the PDF that I have. It's not super strong. It wouldn't attract attention really well, even though the branding is good on it. It would work for something like a Franco-Belgian comic in some cases, but those large hardcover generally also have a strong back cover giving you information as to what's going on. So it's a bit of a trade-off. Luckily, the further issues have a generally better cover than this one. As I got this as a PDF, I can't really tell you the details on the quality of the book and how it's done and everything, but I can tell you that this PDF is the entire first arc of the Hybrids story. It's rather massive. It includes some Kickstarter exclusive and bonuses, a lot of creator commentaries, and all sorts of little fun things like this. It's a pretty heavy PDF, however, I think around 100 megs is the one I got, so I had a bit of a hard time getting it through on my phone, so I had to really download it on my computer. And as with many PDF copies of something, it lacks the digital tracking signature system that I would probably recommend people use, if possible, obviously. As I said, we do get a decent chunk of creator notes before every issue, one at the start, giving us a happy to decided to take this journey with me kind of thing. So it's a pretty good insight into what the author was going through and what he was wanting to do with this series. Closer to what we normally see in manga and early Image comics, some mainstream every once in a while. So it's fairly nice to have this in a book. All right, the next step will be to look at the art here. Unfortunately, you can see that it's in early art piece for the creator here. It's not as refined or as beautiful as you unfortunately now expect from a lot of indie comics. One of the things that is affecting the industry right now is a lot of pros being canceled or moved out of the way. So people that are starting out or people that are new to the business get etched out of it by that. It has a few weird vibes every once in a while where the style goes from fairly realistic to fairly exaggerated in the same panels. So that's what makes this a little bit different. You really have to stick with one or the other when you're doing this kind of work, because outside of manga, it's very rare that you have this, either you go from exaggerated to serious or serious to exaggerated. In American comics, you generally don't have that. Even in European comics, they generally stick with one style. The mechanical design here are fairly simplistic, and they lack the air of professionalism I expect in modern comics. The captured jet is inspired. It's actually really cool looking, but it's missing definition. Things that I would expect from, more professional artists in a way. If you were to, let's say, go with Roger Leloup doing that particular design, it would look not just better, but it would look more practical in the long run. The trash truck that we see is fairly basic, but a trash truck by itself is fairly basic. This is not a deal breaker overall. You see that there's work that's been put on display here. What we're missing is just that extra edge of professionalism that you would have in, let's say, Franco-Belgian comics, or every once in a while in American comic. Backgrounds are generally really good. They're there when they're supposed to be. You've got the necessary accoutrements, let's say, that you would expect in a book. The action scenes use gradient backgrounds, which work perfectly fine in American comics. Here, once again, we have a good trace of something that's going to be good, just missing a little bit of polish to make it better. Another thing here, if you look at the lettering on the Sgt. Pepper on the bowl, it's missing a little bit of professionalism. Once again, it doesn't look quite right once you start looking at it for an extended period of time. It's nothing that will break the deal, but there are things in there that could be issues. Panel work overall is pretty good, even though it's a bit simple. I'm usually not super worried about that. I mean, you've seen me review Soda, you've seen me review a variety of Franco-Belgians already, where they use simple paneling for just about everything. Modern techniques are used. You've got bleeding panels. You've got very nice full pages. You've got a few pages with slash panels like the ones you have here. A lot of it, though, is straight boxes, but nothing doesn't work. The page real estate is really well utilized. This, once again, maybe a bit of more polish is required, but it works really well. Sgt. Pepper looks really good. It's always nice to have a good-looking animal. It's always a plus, and you'll remember me talking about bees at some point in the past. The overall theme here, when we look at the art, is it's inspired. It works really well for what it's supposed to do. It just needs that extra touch. And that extra touch we start seeing in the following volumes and the following issues. I have no issue here overall. If I was to pick up this book from a rack, it might irk me a little bit at first. But, I mean, I generally give books 2 or 3 volumes to make sure that the things are going well or not. 2 or 3 issues, I mean. This is a good first issue in terms of the art, and you see that there's a lot of good things ready to pop out. The introduction to our main character is done fairly well in this particular book. We have a great understanding of his powers, albeit a few little caveats, and a fairly good understanding of his motivations. I think this is a little bit better than trying to introduce and give us the details of an entire team within a single issue. It's a little bit easier to do as well overall. It's also interesting to have a group of bad guys that's just trying to capture our hero, rather than already wanting to destroy the world, take over the universe, extinguish the sun. You know, some of those things that we are currently seeing a lot in newer comics, let's say. It kind of keeps our story relatively grounded and allows us to easily connect with the character rather than seeing something a bit too grand in a way. One thing I'm not a huge fan of is that we're not sure why the VTOL team is supposed to be the bad guys. I mean, we're told that they're bad guys by the drone, and that's about it. Overall, we're missing something here. Maybe a little bit more motivation telling us that they're the bad guys, would have been appreciated within this issue. We also don't get much of the motivation of the other superhero team that's trying to connect with Trashman outside of that they're trying to help him. That makes them easier to identify with, though, and we actually have an easier time saying that, well, yeah, those guys are the good guys. And rather than introducing too many characters, we keep this particular story with the basics. We'll get more of those different characters in the upcoming issues. So this works fairly well, in my opinion. There's nothing really bad or problematic with the story that we have here. It works really well, like I keep saying, and it does engage you as a reader, which is a big plus in this type of book, which can't truly rely just on its art to keep you going, basically. The pacing here is very good overall, and it kind of reminds me of other introduction stories for brand new characters. The way it works here is quite different than what you get in a lot of current books, however. This is a brand new character, but he's also brand new at his power and brand new at his superhero life, which is very different from, let's say, what we get in ISOM, where we have an established hero, which we are introduced to through one of his later adventures. The start of the story works really well with that 2-page flashback. It's almost cliche now to have that in comics, but there's a reason for that. It works in almost every case for that first issue. It was one of my complaints when we were reviewing the Mythicals earlier in the year, that it should have used that format rather than go with a truly sequential kind of storytelling. I know some editors have been going against it, and we've seen some people being weird about flashbacks, let's say. But most of the time, if you do it properly in your story, it's going to work really well. After that, the action flows really well in this book, and there's very little breathing room for exposition or anything like that. It just works for what it's supposed to do. And that's great for that type of story, especially with the slightly shorter format this particular book has. Overall, as a final thought, well, remember that you can't judge a book by its cover, especially in the American comic book industry. You do have to pick up the book and look at what's going on inside of it to know if it's going to be for you or not. This particular book, it is for me. I really like it overall. It has all the elements that I'm interested in and that keep me entertained, but it does need more polish. And even if the later issues have an additional layer of polish, I do think that there's still room for improvement, like with many artists, obviously. This is sort of a common issue in independent comic, especially with those that don't come from the mainstream and are dragged down to go doing Kickstarters. I think that one of the big issue here is the lack of mentorship for a lot of those new artists. And maybe this is a thing that we can discuss more later if I'm able to get more creators on Saturdays and Sundays to talk about what's going on in the industry. From reading forward in the trade paperback, quality of the work keeps improving. The story quality remains fairly high. There's a few little hiccups, a few questionable things for anyone who's not a Christian reading the book. Nothing that I would say is a deal breaker, but things that we'll probably have to talk about as we move on through the issues. While this is not a strong recommend based on just the first issue, the rest of the trade paperback is great. So if you have the opportunity to grab the whole package, basically, this is a thing that you can easily get, and it will entertain you, be put fairly well in your collection, and something you can discuss with others every once in a while as something from a smaller creator that needs some more support, just like all of us small creators do in the way. Overall, I would say it's also a good start for a 90s style superhero comic. I've got nothing but good things to say about this book if we look at the whole package. So I hope you guys enjoyed this little lecture. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. Remember to subscribe, like, ring the bell, do what you please. Leave comments if possible. I always like talking to you guys. Remember to keep on reading comics, keep on enjoying them. I'll keep analyzing them, and I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.
Onward, Christian soldiers, marching as to war.